The banker said her father's workshop was worthless. Then she opened the cellar. For anyone who has ever been told they have nothing, this story is for you. If that sounds like something you need to hear, hit that subscribe button because we're building a community here for people who know what it's like to fight from the bottom. The air in the county services building always smelled the same: weak coffee, disinfectant, and the quiet, papery scent of desperation. It was the smell of my entire life, condensed into one beige room. Today was my 18th birthday. For most people, that meant a party, a car, or at least a cake with their name on it. For me, it meant I was officially an adult, which was the state's polite way of saying I was no longer their problem. I was being aged out. The term was so clinical, so sterile, like a piece of equipment being decommissioned. That's what I felt like. A machine whose warranty had just expired. I sat on a plastic chair that was bolted to the floor, my fingers tracing the cracks in its surface. 2 years in this group home, 4 in the one before that, a string of foster placements stretching back into a fog I couldn't quite penetrate. A decade of being a file in a cabinet, a name on a list, a problem to be managed. My caseworker, a tired woman named Miss Albright, had given me a manila folder with my name on it and a bus token. "Happy birthday, Alara," she'd said, her voice attempting a warmth it couldn't quite achieve. It wasn't her fault. She had 50 other files just like mine on her desk. 50 other expiring warranties. The folder contained my birth certificate, my social security card, and a final placement report that I knew would describe me as stable and resourceful, code for unlikely to cause immediate trouble. I had learned early on that the key to survival in the system was to be forgettable. Don't cry too loud, don't get angry, don't ask for too much. Just be a ghost in the machine, and eventually, the machine lets you go. Today was my release date. I was waiting for the last piece of the puzzle. A man named Mr. Davies, a pro bono lawyer the state assigned to handle the final affairs of kids like me. He was the one who dealt with the loose ends, the forgotten scraps of the lives we had before we became wards of the state. Most kids had nothing. A few had a small trust from a grandparent, $1,000 saved from a tragedy. I expected the same. Maybe a few $100s left in an old bank account my father had. My father. The name was a phantom limb, an ache for something that wasn't there. He'd disappeared when I was 8. One day he was there, smelling of sawdust and turpentine, his hands rough but gentle. The next, he was gone. The police said he abandoned me. The social workers said he was irresponsible. For 10 years, I'd been trying to reconcile the man who taught me how to identify constellations with the man who would leave his daughter alone in a small, empty apartment. It was a wound that never quite closed. The door opened, and Mr. Davies walked in. He was a small, neat man in a slightly frayed suit, his face a constellation of worried lines. He always looked like he was apologizing for the world. He gave me a small, sad smile and sat down opposite me, placing a worn leather briefcase on the table. "Ilara, happy birthday," he said, his voice soft. "I wish the circumstances were more festive." I just nodded. I didn't need festive. I just needed to know what came next. "So," he began, opening his briefcase and pulling out a much thicker file than I'd expected. "We've completed the probate process for your father's estate." The word estate sounded ridiculous. My father was a woodworker, a craftsman. He fixed things. He wasn't the kind of man who had an estate. As you know, since he was declared legally deceased after being missing for 7 years, his assets were frozen. Now that you are of legal age, they transfer to you as his sole heir. He slid a document across the table. It was a deed. The paper was thick and yellowed at the edges. I read the words. It was for a property in a town I'd never heard of, Oakhaven. It was listed as a commercial workshop with a small residential attachment. His workshop. I remembered it in flashes. The high, dusty windows, the scent of cedar shavings, the low hum of the lathe he used to turn beautiful, intricate table legs. A ghost of a memory, warm and safe. He owned it? I whispered. He owned the whole building? Mr. Davies nodded slowly. He did. Outright. The deed is clear. For a single, dizzying moment, hope flared in my chest. A building. A home. A place that was mine. It was more than I had ever dared to dream of. I wasn't homeless. I had a place to go. The feeling was so overwhelming, I felt lightheaded. But then I saw the look on Mr. Davies' face. The apology was back, deeper this time. There are complications, Alara. He pulled out another set of papers. These were stark white, modern, covered in intimidating black text. Your father hadn't paid property taxes on the building for the last 10 years. There's a significant lien against it from the county, to the tune of nearly $25,000. The hope in my chest collapsed into a cold, heavy stone. $25,000. He might as well have said $1 million. I had $213 in my pocket, saved from odd jobs at the group home. Furthermore, he continued, his voice gentle, as if delivering a fatal diagnosis, the building has been vacant for a decade. It's fallen into significant disrepair. The town has cited it for numerous code violations. The roof is failing. There are structural concerns. He trailed off, letting the weight of the words settle. So, what does that mean? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It means the property is, in its current state, a liability, not an asset. The back taxes and the cost of repairs would far exceed its market value. He slid one more piece of paper toward me. It was a recent assessment from a local bank. A single number was circled in red ink. $5,000. The estimated value of the land, provided the derelict structure was demolished. I took the liberty of speaking with the bank that holds the lien, Mr. Davies said, adjusting his glasses. The manager, a Mr. Henderson, was quite clear. He said, and I quote, "The building is worthless, a teardown. The best the girl can do is sign the deed over to the county to settle the tax debt and walk away clean." Walk away clean. Like this was just a bad business deal. Like it wasn't the last piece of my father. The only thing he'd left me in the entire world. A worthless building. A teardown. I stared at the deed, my father's signature, a messy, confident scrawl at the bottom. It was the only piece of his handwriting I had ever seen. "There is another offer," Mr. Davies added, almost as an afterthought. "A development company, Apex Development, has been buying up property on that block. They've made a standing offer to purchase the land for $10,000, contingent on you settling the tax lien first. It would leave you with nothing, but you wouldn't be in debt." He looked at me, his eyes full of pity. And that was worse than anything. I was being offered a choice between nothing and less than nothing. All my life, I had been told what I was worth. My value was calculated in state funding, in the cost of my bed and my food. Now, the last remnant of my family was being valued too, and it was worthless. "So I sign it over?" I asked, my voice numb. "That's your recommendation?" Mr. Davies sighed, a long, weary sound. "Legally, as your counsel, I have to advise you that it is the most financially prudent option. It absolves you of all liability. You walk away, as Mr. Henderson said, clean. You can start your adult life without a $25,000 debt hanging over your head." He paused, then leaned forward slightly. The lawyer was gone, and for a moment, I saw the man. "But, Alara, it's yours." The choice is yours. You don't have to decide today. The county won't foreclose for another 90 days. 90 days. 3 months to decide whether to erase the last trace of my father from the world. I looked down at the bus token in my hand, its metal cool against my skin. I knew what the financially prudent option was. I knew what Ms. Albright would tell me to do, what any sane person would do. But as I sat there in that sterile, beige room, I could almost smell the sawdust. I could almost hear the low hum of the lathe. Worthless? Maybe. But it was his. And now, it was mine. "Where is Oakhaven?" I asked. Mr. Davies blinked, surprised. He pulled a map from his briefcase and unfolded it. He pointed to a small dot 3 hours north, a place where the neat grid of the city frayed into winding country roads. "It's remote," he said. "There's a bus that goes there once a day." I picked up the deed, the heavy paper a solid, real thing in my hands. The banker had never set foot in that building. He'd never known the man who built his life within its walls. He saw numbers on a page. I saw a ghost, a question, a final chance to understand. "I want to see it," I said, my voice clearer and stronger than it had been all day. "I want to see it for myself." The bus station was a vortex of noise and hurried goodbyes. People clung to each other, promising to call, to visit, their faces etched with the temporary pain of departure. I stood alone, a small duffel bag at my feet containing everything I owned: 3 changes of clothes, a worn paperback, and the manila folder with my father's worthless legacy inside. The bus groaned to life, its engine a deep, rattling sigh. I found a seat by a grimy window and pressed my forehead against the cool glass as the city began to slide away. The familiar landscape of concrete and steel, of towering buildings that blocked out the sun, slowly gave way to sprawling suburbs, then to stretches of highway flanked by anonymous chain restaurants and gas stations. For 2 hours, this was the view. A monotonous river of asphalt carrying people from one pocket of civilization to another. My reflection in the window was a pale, translucent mask. A girl with tired eyes and a future that felt as gray and undefined as the overcast sky. I kept replaying the conversation with Mr. Davies, the banker's dismissive words echoing in my head. A teardown, a liability, walk away clean. Every instinct, every lesson the system had taught me screamed that he was right. Don't take on burdens. Don't get attached. Travel light. Survival meant letting go, but my fingers kept finding the edge of the deed in my bag, the sharp corners of the folded paper a strange and solid comfort. Then, the landscape began to change. The highway narrowed into a 2-lane road that wound through rolling hills. The trees grew thicker, their branches forming a canopy over the asphalt. We passed weathered farmhouses with peeling paint, fields of dormant corn stalks standing like skeletal armies, and rusted signs advertising towns that time had forgotten. This was a different world, slower, quieter, steeped in a kind of patient decay. The air that hissed through the window vents began to smell of damp earth and wood smoke instead of exhaust fumes. The few passengers left on the bus were older, their faces lined and weathered like the landscape itself. They spoke in low murmurs, their conversations about local matters, the price of feed, the new pastor, the leak in the town hall roof. I was an alien here, a creature of the city's concrete jungle, and I felt their curious glances like a physical touch. After another hour, the bus slowed, its air brakes hissing as it pulled into the town of Oakhaven. It wasn't so much a town as a crossroads with a few buildings clinging to it. A gas station with a single, ancient pump. A general store with a faded Coca-Cola sign. A small post office. And a handful of houses, their porches sagging, their yards overgrown. The bus driver called out the name of the town, his voice flat, and looked at me in the rearview mirror. I was the only one getting off. I stepped down onto the cracked pavement, my duffel bag slung over my shoulder. The bus pulled away with another sigh of its brakes, leaving me in a profound and unnerving silence. The air was cold and sharp, carrying the scent of pine and wet leaves. There were no sirens, no traffic, no shouting. Just the rustle of the wind and the tall, skeletal trees that gave the town its name. I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. What was I doing here? I was a city girl, used to the anonymity of crowds. Here, I was the only stranger, my presence as loud as a scream in a library. I pulled out the deed. The address was for a street called Mill Lane. I asked the man behind the counter at the general store, a portly gentleman with a kind, tired face. He gave me a long, searching look. "You're headed to the old workshop?" he asked, his voice a slow, rural drawl. I nodded. "That place has been empty a long time," he said, not unkindly. "Belonged to a fellow named Thomas, a real artist with wood. Left town in a hurry years back, left his little girl behind." He didn't realize he was talking to that little girl. I felt my face flush, a hot wave of shame and anger. I was a story here, a piece of local gossip. "Just point me in the right direction, please," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. He seemed to sense my discomfort and simply pointed down the road. "End of the lane. Can't miss it. It's the last building standing." The walk down Mill Lane was short. It was barely a lane at all, more like a paved path that petered out into gravel. And he was right. At the very end, where the road dissolved into a muddy track leading into the woods, stood the workshop. It was worse than I had imagined. Much worse. It was a 2-story brick building, but the bricks were stained with years of grime and creeping moss. Half the windows were boarded up, the others shattered, leaving dark, gaping holes like vacant eyes. The roof sagged dramatically in the middle, a clear sign of water damage and rot. A large wooden sign hung crookedly from a single hinge, the words T. Vance, Custom Woodworking, barely visible beneath layers of faded paint and dirt. It wasn't just neglected. It felt wounded. A place that had given up. My heart sank. The banker was right. Mr. Davies was right. This was a ruin, a pile of bricks and rotting wood that was going to cost a fortune I didn't have. For a moment, I considered turning around, walking back to the bus stop, and taking the first ride back to the anonymous gray of the city. Walk away clean. But I had come all this way. I had to see the inside. The key Mr. Davies had given me was for the front door. It was old and heavy, made of dark, tarnished brass. I slid it into the lock. It was stiff, and I had to put my shoulder into the door to get it to open. It swung inward with a long, groaning shriek of rusted hinges, releasing a wave of cold, musty air. The inside was cavernous, much larger than it looked from the outside. The last of the afternoon light streamed through the high, dirty windows, cutting through the thick dust that coated everything. The air was thick with the ghosts of old smells. Sawdust, oil, varnish, and the damp, earthy scent of decay. It was a cathedral of forgotten work. Huge machines stood silent and shrouded in cobwebs, a table saw, a drill press, a massive lathe that dominated the center of the room. Workbenches lined the walls, their surfaces scarred with the marks of countless projects. Tools still hung from pegboards, each in its place, a ghostly testament to a methodical mind. Saws, hammers, chisels, planes, all coated in a fine layer of dust, waiting for a hand that would never return. I ran my fingers over the surface of a workbench, leaving a clean streak in the grime. Beneath the dust, the wood was smooth and solid. I could feel the faint vibrations of 1,000 hours of work, of creation. This was his space. I could feel him here, more than I had in 10 years of fragmented memories. I walked deeper into the workshop, my footsteps echoing in the vast, silent space. In the back, Partitioned off by a thin wall was the residential area Mr. Davies had mentioned. It was just a single room with a small kitchenette and a bathroom. A narrow cot was pushed against one wall, a thin mattress stained with mildew. A small table and a single wooden chair stood in the center. This is where he lived. It was monastic, simple. Everything was for the work. I spent over an hour just walking, touching things, breathing in the history of the place. It was overwhelming. The scale of the decay was terrifying, but underneath it, I could feel the building's good bones. The main beams were thick and heavy, the brick walls solid. This place had been built to last. It had been neglected, not abandoned. There was a difference. As the light began to fade, my eyes were drawn to one workbench in the far corner. It was smaller than the others, more intricate. It looked like a place for finer, more detailed work. I ran my hand along its edge, and my fingers brushed against a seam that wasn't quite right. A hidden drawer. My heart started to beat a little faster. I pulled at it, and with a soft click, a thin, shallow drawer slid open. It was empty, except for a single object resting on a bed of faded velvet. It was a key. But it was unlike the modern, utilitarian key to the front door. This one was old, ornate, and made of blackened iron, its head shaped like a complex gear or a clockwork mechanism. It was a key for something special, something hidden. What would a key like this open? I scanned the workshop again, my eyes searching for a corresponding lock. There were no chests, no cabinets that looked important enough. Then my foot caught on the edge of a heavy, threadbare rug in the center of the room. I stumbled, and when I looked down, I saw a dark line in the wooden floorboards that had been hidden beneath it. I pulled the rug back. There, set flush with the floor, was a heavy trapdoor with a large, recessed iron ring and a keyhole that looked ancient and forbidding. The keyhole was the exact shape of the ornate key in my hand. The cellar. My breath caught in my throat. A cellar. It wasn't on the property plans Mr. Davies had shown me. This was a secret place. My hand trembled slightly as I knelt and fitted the key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying, heavy clunk, the sound of well-made machinery engaging after a long sleep. I gripped the iron ring with both hands and pulled. The door was incredibly heavy, but it lifted, groaning on hidden hinges, revealing a set of steep, stone steps leading down into absolute darkness. A wave of cold, subterranean air washed over me, smelling of stone and earth and something else. Something clean, like ozone. It didn't smell of mold or damp. It was different from the rest of the building. I hesitated for only a moment. My phone had a flashlight function. I switched it on, its bright, sterile beam cutting a sharp path into the blackness below. Taking a deep breath, I started down the stairs, one careful step at a time, into the heart of my father's secret world. The stone steps were worn smooth in the center, a sign of frequent use. There were maybe 15 of them, leading down to a packed earth floor. I reached the bottom and panned my light around the room. I had expected a damp, spider-infested storage space. What I found stole my breath away. The cellar was not a cellar. It was a room, a study. It was meticulously clean and dry, the stone walls sealed and whitewashed. A single, bare bulb hung from the ceiling, and I found the switch on the wall. It flickered twice, then cast a warm, steady glow over the space. Against the far wall stood a large, beautifully crafted wooden desk, his own work, I was sure. A comfortable leather chair was tucked neatly beneath it. On the desk, there was an old-fashioned architect's lamp, a set of drafting tools arranged with perfect precision, and a heavy, dark green metal box. It looked like a military-grade safe box, with 2 heavy latches and a formidable lock in the center. The lock looked familiar. It was the same intricate, gear-like shape as the keyhole in the trapdoor. My heart was hammering against my ribs now. This was it. This was what he had hidden. I walked to the desk, my footsteps silent on the hard-packed earth. I ran my fingers over the smooth, cool surface of the metal box. I inserted the ornate key. It slid in perfectly. With a turn of my wrist, the lock disengaged with another solid, satisfying clunk. I lifted the latches and slowly, reverently, opened the lid. The inside was lined with felt, and it was full. Not with money, not with jewels. It was full of letters. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, bundled together with simple twine, each bundle marked with a year. And nestled in the center, surrounded by the bundles of paper, was a smaller, exquisitely carved wooden box. It was a puzzle box, its surface a mosaic of interlocking gears and patterns. I reached for the topmost bundle of letters. The year written on the tag was the year he disappeared. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely untie the twine. I pulled out the first letter. It was written on thick, creamy paper in my father's familiar, strong handwriting. The date was 1 week after he had vanished. My eyes filled with tears before I even read the first word. He hadn't just left. He had been writing to me. All this time. I sat down in his chair, the leather creaking under my weight, and began to read. "My dearest Elara," the letter began. "If you are reading this, then I have failed in one way and succeeded in another. I have failed to return to you, and for that, my heart breaks into 1,000,000 pieces. But I have succeeded in keeping you safe, and that was the only thing that ever truly mattered. I know what they told you, that I abandoned you, that I was a bad father. It is a story I had to let them believe, a lie that was your only shield. Please, my love, you have to believe me. I never wanted to leave you. Every single day for the past week has been a special kind of hell, knowing you are alone, thinking your father didn't love you enough to stay. But my leaving was the only way to prove how much I did love you. I had to stop, my vision blurring through a thick sheet of tears. I wiped them away with the back of my hand and forced myself to continue reading. His words were a balm on a wound I'd carried for a decade. He explained everything. He wasn't just a woodworker, he was an inventor, specializing in intricate clockwork mechanics. A horologist. He had been commissioned by a wealthy local businessman, the patriarch of the family that now owned Apex Development, to create a series of complex mechanical devices. But as he worked, he discovered their true purpose. They weren't just curiosities, they were timing devices for illegal operations, mechanisms for laundering money, things he didn't fully understand but knew were deeply criminal. He had stumbled into the heart of a local empire built on corruption. "I tried to go to the police," he wrote, "but the rot in this town runs deep. The threats were not overt. They were quiet. A mention of your school. A comment about how easily a child could get hurt. They knew you were my only weakness, my whole world. I couldn't risk you, Elara. So I made a choice. I would disappear. I would become a ghost, a cautionary tale of an irresponsible father. It was the only way to make them believe they had won, to make them leave you alone. They would let the state take you, and they would assume you were lost in the system, no longer a threat." The letter went on to explain his plan. He had spent the year before he left liquidating every asset he had. He sold patents for his inventions, took on private commissions, and converted every last dollar into untraceable, non-sequential bearer bonds. He had hidden them. The workshop, he explained, was not just a building, it was a vault. "They think this place is worthless," he wrote, and I could almost hear the grim satisfaction in his voice. "Let them. Its value is not in its bricks or its land. Its value is as a fortress for your future. I have left you everything. Enough to buy your safety, your education, your freedom. But you have to be smart. They are still here. The same family, more powerful than ever. They want this land. They want to erase this last piece of me. Do not let them." The letter ended with a clue, a riddle. "To find your inheritance, look to the place where my time with you began and ended, where time itself stands still, waiting for you to start it again. I sat back in the chair, the letter clutched in my hand, my mind reeling. My entire world had been upended. He didn't abandon me. He saved me. Every day I had spent in foster care, feeling lost and unloved, had been a testament to his sacrifice. The anger I had harbored for him for 10 years dissolved, replaced by a wave of grief so profound it felt like I was drowning. I cried. I cried for the little girl who waited by the window for a father who never came home. I cried for the man who had to tear his own life apart to protect his daughter. I cried for the 10 lost years, the stolen memories, the unspoken love. I sat there in the silent, secret room beneath the workshop for what felt like hours, just crying, letting the pain and the love and the relief wash over me. When the tears finally subsided, a new feeling began to surface. Anger. A cold, hard anger directed at the people who had done this. Apex Development. The family that had threatened a child to control her father. They were still here, still trying to take what was mine, still trying to erase him. I looked at the small, carved wooden box on the desk. I picked it up. It was light, and the wood was warm to the touch. I twisted one of the gears on its surface, and another piece shifted. It was a complex puzzle, a lock of his own design. I worked at it for a few minutes, my fingers tracing the patterns, feeling the way the pieces fit together. With a final, soft click, the lid sprang open. Inside, resting on a bed of dark blue velvet, was a small, perfect clockwork bird, its feathers crafted from slivers of polished brass and silver. It was exquisite, a masterpiece of miniature engineering. It was a piece of his soul, a thing of pure beauty he had created and left for me. As I was staring at it, my phone buzzed in my pocket, the sound violent and intrusive in the quiet cellar. I almost didn't answer it. The caller ID was an unknown number. I hesitated, then swiped to accept. "Is this Alara Vance?" a man's voice asked. It was smooth, professional, and dripping with a false sincerity that set my teeth on edge. "Yes," I said, my voice hoarse from crying. "My name is Mark Trask. I'm an associate with Apex Development. I understand you've recently taken possession of the property on Mill Lane." My blood ran cold. How did they know so fast? "We've been interested in acquiring that parcel for some time to complete a commercial revitalization project for Oakhaven," he continued, his voice oozing corporate charm. "Frankly, the building is an eyesore and a public hazard. We'd be doing you a favor by taking it off your hands. Our previous offer of $10,000 still stands. It's a generous offer, considering the tax situation." Generous. The word was an insult. He was acting like he was doing me a favor, trying to bully me with the same information the banker had used. He saw a scared, broke 18-year-old he could easily manipulate. He didn't know he was talking to the daughter of the man they had destroyed. He didn't know I was sitting in a secret room, holding my father's last words in my hand. "You have no idea how much that property is worth," I said, my voice low and steady, laced with a fury I hadn't known I possessed. Trask chuckled, a patronizing sound. "Oh, I think I do, Miss Vance. It's a worthless ruin with a $25,000 lien. We're offering you a clean slate. You should take it. I'd hate for you to end up saddled with a debt you can't possibly pay." It was a threat, veiled in the language of concern. That was the moment everything crystallized. All the grief, all the confusion, all the years of feeling powerless coalesced into a single point of diamond-hard certainty. I looked at my father's letter. I looked at the beautiful clockwork bird. I thought of the man in the general store, his quiet gossip a reflection of the story they had spun to cover their crimes. This wasn't just about a building anymore. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming my father's name. "The property is not for sale," I said. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Miss Vance, perhaps you're not understanding the situation." "I understand it perfectly," I interrupted, my voice ringing with newfound strength in the enclosed space. "And I'm telling you, it's not for sale. Not now. Not ever. Don't call me again." I hung up before he could reply, my hand shaking with adrenaline. I had just declared war on the most powerful people in town. I was 18 years old, alone, with $200 to my name. And I had never felt so strong in my entire life. My choice was made. I wasn't just going to see the workshop, I was going to stay. I was going to fight. I was going to bring it and my father's memory back to life. My father's riddle echoed in my mind. "Where my time with you began and ended, where time itself stands still." I left the cellar, the heavy trap door closing with a soft thud behind me, sealing its secrets once more. I walked back into the main workshop, seeing it now with new eyes. It wasn't a ruin. It was a puzzle. A fortress. I scanned the vast room, my gaze falling on every clock I could find. There were several, small mantel clocks on shelves, the disassembled face of a tower clock on a workbench, but none of them seemed right. Then I saw it, tucked away in a dusty corner, half hidden by a stack of lumber. A grandfather clock. It was tall and imposing, its dark wood case carved with intricate patterns of oak leaves and acorns. It was beautiful, even under a thick coat of grime. I walked toward it, my heart beginning to pound again. Its long pendulum was still. Its hands were frozen on the face. I looked closer at the time they indicated. 2:17. I pulled my birth certificate from the folder Mr. Davies had given me. I scanned down the document. Time of birth, 2:17 a.m. A chill went down my spine. This was it. The place where time stood still, at the exact moment my life began. The clock face was protected by a glass door. I opened it gently. The hands were made of finely wrought brass. I touched them, and they felt solid, unmoving. I ran my hands down the sides of the clock's tall case, searching for a hidden latch, a secret button. Near the base, my fingers found a small, almost invisible indentation in the carved oak leaves. I pressed it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I heard a soft internal click. A section of the clock's base, disguised as a decorative panel, swung inward, revealing a dark, hollow compartment. My breath hitched. I knelt down and reached inside. My fingers brushed against a heavy, oilskin-wrapped package. It was heavy, far heavier than paper. I pulled it out into the dim light. My hands trembled as I unwrapped the layers of protective cloth. Inside were not letters, but stacks and stacks of bearer bonds, thick and official, their denominations printed in elegant script. And beneath them, in a waterproof sleeve, was the original, unencumbered deed to the workshop, filed and stamped years before the tax lien was ever placed. There was also a small, leather-bound ledger. I opened it. My father's neat, precise handwriting filled the pages. It was a detailed record of every transaction with Apex Development's predecessor, every veiled threat, every date, every name. It was the evidence he'd collected, a meticulous account of their crimes. This was it. This was my inheritance. Not just money, but a weapon. A way to fight back. A way to clear his name. I sat on the dusty floor, the bonds and the ledger in my lap, and I finally understood the genius of his plan. He hadn't just left me money. He had left me a choice. He had given me the tools to build a future and the evidence to reclaim the past. I could take the bonds, cash them in some distant city, and disappear, just like he had. Or I could stay. I could use this evidence. I could use this money to pay the taxes, to fix the roof, to restore this workshop. I could make this place a home, a monument to the man who had sacrificed everything for me. The first thing I did was call Mr. Davies. It was late, but I didn't care. He answered on the third ring, his voice groggy with sleep. "Ilara, is everything all right?" I took a deep breath. "Mr. Davies," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of excitement and fear. "The banker was wrong. Apex Development was wrong. You were wrong. This place isn't worthless." I explained everything. The cellar, the letters, the grandfather clock, the bonds, the ledger. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When he finally spoke, the tired, pragmatic lawyer was gone. His voice was sharp, focused, and energized. "Don't touch anything else, Ilara," he said, his tone urgent. "Don't talk to anyone. I'm driving up there first thing in the morning. We are going to a very secure bank in a different county, and we are going to have those bonds authenticated and placed in a safety deposit box. And then, we are going to have a very long talk about that ledger. You did good, kid. Your father would be proud." Hearing those words, "your father would be proud," cracked something open in me. It was a validation I had been craving my entire life. After I hung up, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Instead, I found a broom. The handle was smooth and worn from my father's hands, and I started to sweep. I swept away the dust and the cobwebs, the grime of 10 years of neglect. With each stroke of the broom, I felt like I was clearing away the lies, the loneliness, the feeling of being abandoned. I was sweeping out the old story and making room for the new one. The floor beneath the dust was solid, beautiful, old hardwood. As I swept, I uncovered the marks and scars of my father's work. A deep gouge where something heavy had fallen, a dark stain from spilled varnish. These weren't imperfections. They were history. They were proof of a life lived, of things being made. By the time the first rays of dawn crept through the dirty windows, I had cleared a large section of the main floor. The light fell across the clean-swept boards, illuminating the potential that had been hidden beneath the filth. This was not the act of cleaning a building. It was the act of reclaiming a home. It was the beginning of my real life. Mr. Davies was as good as his word. He arrived the next morning, his small car crunching on the gravel outside. The look on his face when he saw the workshop, and then the cellar, and then the contents of the oilskin package, was one of pure, unadulterated shock. He handled the bonds and the ledger with a reverence I hadn't thought him capable of. We spent the next week in a whirlwind of legal activity. The bonds were authenticated. Their value was staggering, far more than I could have imagined. It was enough to pay the tax lien 20 times over, enough to restore the workshop to its former glory, enough for me to live on, to go to college, to do anything I wanted. It was freedom, printed on thick paper. Mr. Davies, now acting as my official legal counsel, filed the original deed with the county, invalidating their foreclosure claim. He paid the back taxes in full with a cashier's check that made the county clerk's eyes widen in disbelief. The lien was lifted. The workshop was truly, completely mine. Then he made a call to a state investigator, a man he trusted, and sent him a carefully copied and notarized version of my father's ledger. An official investigation was opened into the business practices of Apex Development. The apathetic system that had once failed me and my father was now, slowly, beginning to work for us. Mark Trask from Apex called again, his voice no longer smooth and confident, but tight with panic. I let the call go to voicemail. I didn't need to talk to him. The ledger would do the talking for me. With the legal matters handled, I returned to Oak Haven not as a scared orphan, but as a property owner. I started the real work. I hired a local roofing company, run by a man who remembered my father. "Your dad was a good man," he told me, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "An artist, glad to see this place coming back to life." I had the broken windows replaced. I had the plumbing and electricity inspected and brought up to code. Every day, I worked alongside the crews, hauling debris, sanding floors, learning how to repair what was broken. I moved the small cot from the back room into the main workshop, sleeping among the silent machines under the new, sturdy roof. The people in town started to notice. The man from the general store, whose name I learned was George, started giving me a friendly nod when I came in to buy groceries. An elderly woman who lived down the lane brought me a freshly baked apple pie, her way of saying welcome. I was no longer just a piece of old gossip. I was becoming a part of the town, a fixture. One day, while cleaning out the last of the junk in the back room, I found a box of my old things. A few faded drawings, a worn teddy bear, things my father had kept. He hadn't erased me. He had held on to every piece of me he could. That night, I took the clockwork bird from its box. I had found a small key on my father's desk that seemed to fit a tiny winding hole on its underside. I turned it carefully. A series of clicks echoed in the quiet workshop, and then, a miracle. The bird's tiny head turned, its beak opened, and it began to sing. It wasn't a recording. It was a complex series of metallic notes, a beautiful, intricate melody played by the delicate clockwork mechanism inside. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of my father's love, a song he had built for me, note by mechanical note, a melody that had waited 10 years in the darkness to be heard. It was the sound of hope. I sit here now, at my father's desk in the cellar, the letters spread out before me. It's been 6 months. The workshop above is transformed, the floors are polished, the new windows let in streams of bright, clean light. The machines are cleaned and oiled, ready to be used again. I've started teaching myself how to use them, how to work the wood, following the plans and sketches I found in my father's notebooks. It's a slow process, but every time I make a clean cut or a smooth joint, I feel a connection to him, a continuation of his legacy. The investigation into Apex development is ongoing, but the town is buzzing with the news. Other people, emboldened by my father's ledger, have come forward with their own stories of intimidation and fraud. The empire of lies has started to crack. The workshop is more than just a building to me now. It's my home. It's my history. It's my future. It's a testament to the fact that value is not something a banker can assess or a developer can purchase. True worth lies in the things we build, the sacrifices we make, the love we embed in the world around us. My father built this place not just with bricks and mortar, but with a fierce, protective love. He built me a sanctuary and trusted that one day I would be strong enough to find it. He was right. They tell you what you're worth. They put a number on your property, a label on your file, a story to your name that isn't yours. They tell you something is worthless, a teardown, a liability. They tell you to walk away clean, but they don't know what's hidden in the cellar. They don't know about the sacrifices made in secret, the love that's been waiting in the dark. They don't know the strength you carry inside you. If you've made it this far, maybe it's because you know what it's like to be underestimated. Maybe you've had to fight to find the true value in something everyone else has written off. The world is full of worthless buildings and forgotten people, just waiting for someone to come along and see the truth. Have you ever had a moment like that? A moment where you discovered that the thing everyone told you to throw away was actually the most valuable thing you had? I want you to tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one because these stories, your stories, are what build a community. They remind us that we're not alone in our fight. This channel is for everyone who has ever had to dig through the dust to find their own inheritance. If that's you, I hope you'll subscribe and become a part of this story. Because the truth is, we are all more than the numbers on a page. We are all stronger than the lies they tell about us. And sometimes, the most important work we can do is simply the act of staying, of rebuilding, of refusing to let the things we love be called worthless.